In 1803, the Louisiana Purchase doubled the physical size of the United States overnight. But as you can see from the shaded area on this map, the government had entirely no idea what they had just bought. President Jefferson commissioned an expedition to find the Northwest Passage, a theoretical water route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific. But time was short. British and Russian ships were securing Pacific trade. The U.S. needed to navigate that blank map before Europe locked down the territory. The Court of Discovery had to move fast. They were racing to execute a geopolitical land grab based entirely on a geographical rumor. Jefferson and Captain Meriwether Lewis did their planning in a library. They read a book by an earlier explorer and assumed the western terrain would be cooperative. They pictured a straightforward journey, sailing up the Missouri River, carrying boats over a modest hill, and dropping them into a westward flowing river. Anticipating a brief walk, they packed heavy, bringing artillery, scientific instruments, and a massive flat-bottomed keelboat designed for calm waters. In May 1804, 45 people set out from the St. Louis area. The group included military men and civilian volunteers, a Newfoundland dog named Seaman, and York, an enslaved black man forced to accompany his enslaver. They pushed overloaded boats against the Missouri's current, equipped for a smooth cruise, and entirely unprepared for the sheer vertical terrain that actually awaited them. The river track was exhausting from day one. By August, the physical strain took its toll when Sergeant Charles Floyd died, the expedition's only fatality. They were not entering a vacant landscape. The Great Plains were a densely populated patchwork of sovereign Native American nations who heavily managed and protected regional trade routes. In September, the expedition hit a political wall. The Lakota Nation controlled this stretch of the river and expected tribute from anyone passing through. When the Americans refused to pay the expected toll, the disagreement nearly triggered a shootout. The Americans were vastly outnumbered. They survived the standoff by backing down and handing out tobacco, gifts, and silver peace medals bearing Thomas Jefferson's face, cooling tempers just enough to secure passage upstream. Making it through that first year required careful diplomacy with established native empires rather than brute military force. Trapped by the freezing winter of 1804, they built Fort Mandan. Here, they hired a French-Canadian fur trapper and his Shoshone wife, Sacagawea, to act as interpreters. A woman traveling with a newborn infant signaled to every native group they encountered that this heavily armed military unit was on a peaceful mission. By late summer 1805, they finally traced the Missouri River to its source. Lewis hiked up to the Lenhi Pass on the Continental Divide. The Continental Divide is the natural boundary line separating river systems that flow to opposite sides of a continent. Standing there, Lewis fully expected to see a gentle slope leading down to a navigable river. Instead, he looked out over hundreds of miles of jagged, snow-capped peaks. There was absolutely no water route. The scientific survey instantly became a fight for survival. The crew nearly starved and froze attempting to cross the Bitterroot Mountains on foot. They only made it through because the Nez Perce tribe took them in and fed them. That view from the Lemhi Pass killed a centuries-old geographic fantasy. The easy portage didn't exist, and the United States now had to reckon with the punishing reality of Western geography. They eventually navigated their way to the Columbia River, riding its currents all the way to the Pacific Ocean in November 1805. To survive the freezing coastal rain of their second winter, they built Fort Clatsop. Before building the fort, the group held a vote to choose its location. In a rare suspension of the era's strict social hierarchies, both Sacagawea and York cast equal votes alongside the white officers. That wooden structure provided shelter, but it also functioned as a physical flag in the ground, establishing a formal, legal American claim to the Pacific coast. The crew hurried back to St. Louis in 1806. They had failed to find a continuous commercial waterway, but they brought back highly detailed maps and documented over 200 new plant and animal species. The white explorers received massive tracts of land and double pay for their efforts. York, however, was returned to slavery, denied any reward or freedom despite his equal labor in keeping the expedition alive. The Lewis and Clark expedition didn't find the easy trade route Thomas Jefferson dreamed of. Instead, they mapped the harsh, unforgiving truth of the continent, drawing the blueprints for the westward expansion of the United States.